Okay.
Well, okay, so here's Alan and I again. I guess we're doing another always record.
Yeah.
Um, Alan and I have both had rather difficult weeks, I would say. So
hmm
we're kind of in a pensive mood. I wonder what would be a good sync topic to match our respective sort of struggles here. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I could jump straight into like the the difficult stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. Yeah, yeah.
th- because I've been thinking a lot about psychosis recently.
Yes. Yes, me as well.
Uh, because it's something I don't understand a lot. I don't really know what it is. And I've been watching videos on it. I'm always
I don't understand it. I don't know what it is, and I've been watching videos about it. That's like
yeah.
that's a T-shirt ready to happen.
It's because I feel as if the more I watch it, the more I feel like I understand that. Okay, so psychosis. Okay, the reason. Okay, why am I thinking about psychosis? Just because I feel as if there are times when sync gets so intense that you wonder whether you're in a healthy space or whatever, or stuff like that. And also
Yes.
because there are times, and this is like the other flip side of this, there are times that you feel that some people may want to um, judge you, or how to say it, put you in a box precisely by saying that you're insane or you have psychosis or whatever.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have psychosis, and so I feel like this needs to be disentangled somehow. The ways
Mm.
in which maybe sync is healthy. I
Yes.
mean, that doesn't even make sense. But I think you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Um.
um. Sort of,
Well, the whole, or
yeah.
it seems as if maybe one
Hmm.
of the points of synchronicity is to produce this sort of confrontation. Like, I often wonder if the entire thing isn't ultimately about confronting and integrating madness, and that's just it. That's
Ah.
actually just
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
It's there is no such thing, maybe, as a human being that isn't mad.
Mm,
It's just that
mm.
it's all invisible often, and
Yeah.
all that this thing is that we're doing, it's literally just like finding a window and looking in, and being like amazed and disturbed by the fact that beneath this veneer of rational, non-psychotic, supposedly daily experience and interaction that we have, you
Yeah.
know, there's this sea of irrational
Mm,
meaning. And see, that's the thing I think about psychosis and what we call
mm,
insanity.
mm,
Um, People like to say, and I'm sure we've made this point probably publicly before even, but
mm,
people like to say about like crazy drawings and so on that they're
mm.
just random, or they people will say that about dreams even. If you have a
Yeah.
crazy dream, they'll say, well, dreams, it's just like, who knows, and kind of like throw up their hands at it. Um, but the problem of this stuff is that it's not that way at all. It's so organized, and there are these themes, and it's very like it's as if there is a psychotic mind that we all partake of.
Mm. Yeah.
We could call it something else. The word psychotic is value judgment laden, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, but there's this mind that ideates irrationally,
Mm,
and yeah, it's like what Jung observed. It's collective, at least in the sense that it's sort of the same in every person. It's the
mm.
same insane preoccupations and ideas.
Ah.
I mean, there's a variety of such things, but it's a kind of a predictable cast of things
Yeah.
eventually. And Jung started to see that working with patients, and then drew the natural correlations back to dreams and things that he was analyzing in non-psychotic patients. So I take that pretty seriously, I guess. I really think that this psychotic thing is more about a total system state. There's a global problem of some sort, like the parts aren't getting along and something unusual has happened. But I think that the content that we call insane is itself probably healthy, in the sense that it's just, it's like your blood and guts are healthy too. Those make you live.
Yeah, right.
It's not good if they're spilling out of your body.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the psyche, it's different. That metaphor only goes so far, because we're not talking about blood and guts. We're talking about something much more subtle. So it's not clear that just the exposure is unhealthy. But I think that in the process of exposing it, we judge it, and that's quite unhealthy. I think that it's the shame and the judgment of this kind of ideation that fuels a lot of the mental health problems associated with it, and ironically prevent it from itself becoming a salve. I do believe that insynchronicity is it's what Jung believed too, I guess, because he formed a whole therapeutic process around it. but that in this thing there is the key to actually a revolution in mental health. That viewing it as if it's a symptom of illness is really the wrong way. It's there's the synchronic domain that is just happening and is ongoing, and we don't know what that is. It's at least something that seems to be happening in our heads in a fairly collective way, and people dip into it in different ways. Some through their dreams, some through their fantasies, some through other very strange procedures like the sorts we've developed with displays and so on. Okay, I'm done ranting about that now. You should contribute.
God, that I love that, because this thing about the guts spilling.
Yeah.
Because I was watching different vlogs by like YouTubers who had psychotic episodes, and they were just describing what had happened and stuff. And it was so interesting because it felt like not guts, but like some sort of a spillage, in the sense that libido had gotten out of control or something like that. And I could recognize myself in many of the stages that they were describing. But like you say, I think that maybe the crucial thing is this thing about judgment and shame.
Yes.
Because it felt as if like many of the stages that people describe are things like strange thoughts. They call them strange thoughts, like intrusive.
It's so sad. We shouldn't be laughing at this. We're just laughing because we identify so much. Yeah,
exactly. Just the idea that strange thoughts would be like a bad thing is funny. But of course, like I can
just try to imagine someone who's never had a strange thought or something, like suddenly developing it as a problem. Oh God, strange thoughts. There's something funny about that.
I know exactly, and it's kind of
as someone who is kind of born into strange thoughts, it's hard for me to imagine. But
it's and it's like it's tragic. I remember like this girl I used to know who never sort of completely went into psychosis, I think, but she had a moment where she was having like very violent thoughts about like I don't know, killing her family or stuff like that, and she was really upset by them because her ego persona was like extremely how would I say it, like extremely nice to her family, and she was always helping and always
this is such a classic case.
Right. Exactly. And I remember that I didn't know her very well, but I remember she went to like a little bit of therapy because of that, and she was really it really was yeah, upsetting. And it's funny because it really reminds me that what's happening there, probably simplifying a little bit, is that those thoughts are being judged prematurely. They're being
Right,
there's
right.
like because you can have an extremely violent thought or something that you don't maybe identify with in your persona,
Yes,
but
yeah.
but if you somehow don't immediately judge it as negative, then the experience actually becomes very healing, like you said, like
Yes, yeah. Or
and
can
and
anyway.
oh, can, yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's, and it's so tricky to navigate because um it's like the classic example we always
Yes.
talk about from the Red Book of Jung imagining himself like devouring a corpse or something like that,
Yes,
like
the maiden, yeah.
Maiden, like that. I feel as if
Such a gnarly part of that book. How
yeah,
crazy that that book contains such a thing.
yeah, yeah, and
It
that
gets all metal music video.
exactly, and that's not. It doesn't seem to be like a part of mainstream Jungian
No,
culture,
they
right?
really rather seem to avoid it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, but it made me realize that I feel as if maybe exactly the thing about judgment is a good place to start. That maybe if you start having thoughts that you don't identify, because that's the thing. Imagine I'm going to speculate here, but this girl, she probably um, did have a lot of resentment towards her family that she wasn't
Right,
accepting.
right, right.
And it was so hidden that it came out in explosive bursts. So
Yes.
again, speculating, I would assume that um, somehow, at least learning to recognize that part of yourself, that oh,
Mm.
there is a part of me that really wants to to sort of get back at all the people that have taken advantage of me. To recognize
Yes.
that part is actually a healthy thing. It can be a
Yes,
healthy
yeah.
thing because it can actually lead you to not enact those
Right.
violent thoughts
Right.
by recognizing that they have a root that is deeper, and that therefore the solution is also deeper than just
Yes.
hurting someone.
Yes. And then also
Uh,
that they're
yeah.
rooted in things that are a bit outside of our control, really. I
Mhm.
just think this is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
People imagine that they are, this is tricky because we are very responsible for ourselves. And that's rather the
Mm.
whole point. We need to conduct ourselves in a good way on planet Earth, but,
Yeah.
uh, but, but I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I am really distracted by my girl situation. I should say for everyone, my situation is I'm a little heartbroken this week. I'm not going to get into any more detail about it than that, but you know,
Yeah.
life continues to move forward, and sometimes it includes missed connections and other sad things. So, what were we talking about? Remind me that it's not about
Yeah.
this girl that I. Yeah.
Right. uh no. Yes.
I
I
was
think
building to something there. I just completely lost it. I'm not. I'm
yes.
not chemically supported enough yet this morning. I'm gonna fix that here.
Chemical support. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. No, so yes, we were talking about yes, that these things are often out of our control, that
Yes,
that
that's it. Yeah.
we have to be nice, but there is
But there's an instinctual matrix of animal behavior that just has its own ideas about what's fair and what isn't.
yeah. Yeah.
And when you feel personally slighted in some way, um, even if it's in like a long form situation, like with this person and her family,
Mm.
um, maybe there were like mini building resentments and so on. And you consciously say, I shouldn't have this feeling. I shouldn't resent my mother or my father or hate my brother or my sister or this or that. Um, but it's not up to you. You do have those hatreds and those angers, and it's. I think people they jump too
Yeah.
quickly to feeling personally responsible for their feelings. You know,
Yes.
you're responsible for your behavior, but your feelings, you do. I mean, I don't know who thinks they can control them. It just doesn't work that way for me. Maybe I am just fucked up. But like when my emotions are active, they roll over me like a natural event. You know, I can't really pretend that I chose to have them or that they say very much about me. Really, I mean, they say a bit about you.
Yeah.
You have reactions that are the cause of beliefs sometimes. Those are
Hmm.
different, right?
Yeah.
Feelings are complicated because they're not always instinctual like that. Feelings can form on the basis of very conscious ideations. You can talk yourself into being sad or happy or so on, you know?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I think of feelings almost more like it's a display that's hooked up to many sources or a few sources. And so part of the subtlety and the difficulty is sorting out like, what is this display showing me? Is it something intuitive? Is it something intellectual? Is it something, you know? It's a holistic display. The emotions give you the big picture, you know? But what that big picture is actually in reference to, it's often very tricky. Okay, you have to
Yeah.
pick it up now because I'm going to take a drag off my
Okay.
thing.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I love the idea of a display because, like you say, it's as if you have feelings and you already like having them. When you're aware of them, they're already happening. It's not a question of, oh, I shouldn't be having this feeling. I mean, you're already having
Right, you're
it.
in the middle of
Like
it.
you're in the middle of it. So y all you can do is observe it for the time
Yes.
being, just as an initial kind of step. Um,
Yeah, this is such a,
yeah.
I feel like these are kind of like basic, like figuring out how to live on planet Earth things that probably like teenagers learn
Mm.
on some level. But for me, it's all very like fresh information somehow. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
tricky to sort that out.
It's funny, actually that taps into something else. I've been thinking about this, that we are, yeah, we're learning stuff that you learn classically in adolescence.
Yes. I wonder, you know, I think my tendency is to immediately sort of take full personal responsibility for something like that and say, gosh, I must just be really stunted, you know? And then
Mm,
I think back over my life and I can find many ways in which I was. Like a big realization for me recently is that I kind of grew up in a prison attached to a cult or something. Like maybe that really stunted me. You know,
mm,
it's.
mm,
I mean, I'm being very unkind to my past there. Like I'm framing it in almost the worst way that I could. But
mhm.
sort of picking up on our last topic there, it's good to acknowledge that on some level.
Yes.
You know, like I grew up. I went to a school that was very strange and had a lot of violence, and there were like kind of like gangs there almost, and like we had to develop all these basically underground support networks and things, you know, and it was just very much it was just a lot like prison. And then in my family life there was like it was good, but there was this big religious issue that kind of got in the way a little bit of um, my like 11-year-old needs, emotional needs being met or something.
Yeah.
Um, and so those things, you know, it's easy to look at things like that and say, okay, I didn't have a correct adolescence because I carried those experiences forward in a way that I'm
Mm,
really, really only just in the last, you know, it's been a tough week in a few ways, you know. One of the things this week is just really starting to come to terms with this stuff again. Like uh, those experiences that happened very early on in my life, they really influenced a lot of my life. So I do think that there's always that. I wanted to share all that, I guess, just because I'm in a mood too. It's like a rainy day here, and I'm, you know, a little miserable, but also
yeah.
because I just think it. Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, that
Well,
seemed appropriate to share.
yeah, no, it's I think
Four
that
birds just landed on my balcony. Oh, there they go, gone just as quick.
huh. But it's definitely part of it's definitely part of this whole thing we're talking about. I think the framing, like you say, learning to frame your past in a negative light, or learning to see the things that
Right.
you didn't like about it, or something like that, and maybe to
Yes.
accept that, um and
Oh, I
in
think
order
where I
to
was
do,
going was that maybe there's
yeah,
also like a generational issue here. That maybe it's not
right,
purely personal. That perhaps in
hmm,
addition to maybe, I mean, I was just speaking for myself, but maybe you identify slightly too. Like
hmm,
we're like, maybe we are personally a little stuck in adolescence still in certain ways,
yeah,
more so than the average person or something. But I also think that just averagely, there's definitely seems like an extending of adolescence, generally speaking. Like
yeah, yeah.
it seems like, I don't know. I don't think it's just us, but I don't know what it's about. And
Mm,
I have to say, it all seems kind of dire to me. The
mm.
first place I go with it is definitely to a kind of like, these are signs of a species that is about to be extinct or something. I don't
Right. it's
know.
it's funny because I
They're not
have also,
developing properly anymore. There's
mm.
some bad mutation. They take 40 years to reach maturity, and then when they do, they're all fucked up. It sounds like some kind of environmental problem. I don't know.
I it's funny
I'm
because
sure I'm wrong about that. I'm in a terrible mood. It's probably more to the point that just, human development is very complicated. People are very complicated, and they can break down in all sorts of ways, and you can have all kinds of problems, and we don't understand ourselves at all, and so we don't have any good advice. And no one told me. No one told me that I should go into therapy right away. No one told me that at 13 I should have been in therapy already. My parents certainly weren't going to tell me that. You know,
yeah,
it was all too close for all of us. It's not that they wouldn't have wanted to if they could. They just couldn't see it. They couldn't see that that was a need, that was necessary.
yeah,
Um, or that something like that was necessary. Nobody told me that running from my childhood wasn't going to work in the long run. And
mm,
we just don't get, like, who would have told you that? We don't get that kind of life education, how to deal with trauma and psychological development. And, we don't, it's just like, we kind of do, like, we make some attempt to address it, but we have no idea what we're talking about. It's all just a bunch of stupid platitudes. Like, the only way to learn it, unfortunately, is with the life experience. But then that means you have to get cut up so bad through the process of learning all this. This is learning. Learning is it's the worst, because there's always
yeah,
this reward punishment dynamic with it. It's just the nature of learning. You have to fail a
mm,
lot. I think we're doing that with ourselves just constantly. We're trying to understand ourselves, and and that's more or less explicit. For some people, they understand themselves primarily through their relationships. So they're chasing reflections of themselves in other people and so on. For other people, it becomes maybe like more psychotic, more
mm,
direct. For me, it's complicated now. I have the usual kind of thing where I'm attracted to people platonically, romantically, male and female, on the basis of their I don't know, like their resonance or something.
yeah.
But on the other hand, gosh, I'm doing this repetitively today. I'm starting ideas and then just not completing them. My brain is not under my control. This is so terrible. Emotions it's so funny we're talking about this, but like,
Mm,
they get in the way of clear thinking. That's a very interesting thing to note about them. What is
yes,
that? I'm so distracted. I can't keep a thread straight. It just,
yeah.
keeps returning to like the terrible feeling in my belly. Ugh. Why should they be competitive that way? That seems like a design flaw. Seems terrible. But is it rather the point? Is it maybe the point of them is that you're not supposed to think when you have them? I don't know.
Interesting. I've been feeling stuff like that recently.
It's like
Of
when you get sick, your body makes you feel really bad so that you don't exert yourself. It's like so that you stay still and can conserve your energy. Maybe there's some weird thing like that. Your brain has had it. It's too much, so it throws it to the emotion system. I don't know.
Well, it's funny. This is another kind of a tangent, but I've been thinking that I've been really thinking recently that depression for me has often had to do. We might have already talked about it in this, but depression has to do with effort. In at least in my case, that this has been a strange thing to think about. That the feeling of depression for me is the feeling of there is some effort that is not wanting to be made, but somehow because of peer pressure or
interesting,
yeah, I wish I had some specific example. It's kind of like that because of peer pressure and all sorts of habits, I make an effort to not feel the way I'm feeling, or not to not feel the feelings that I'm feeling. So that, and what's strange about that is that I have this intuition that when you actually feel the feelings that you are feeling, they're not that bad, and in fact, they can actually be pretty healing and nice. So
that's interesting.
I just got this feeling that that sometimes in depression, there is something that is wanting to be felt, and I am avoiding at all costs feeling it, or something like that.
So when you're depressed,
I don't know.
Do you feel sad, or is it a distinct emotional experience from that?
Yeah, it's funny.
Because it would seem that sadness would be probably what you're avoiding, right? So what are you actually feeling, I wonder? Is it just a kind of an impression of sadness, but like quiet? Or is it something else completely?
It's funny. I've often thought about what the difference is between sadness and depression.
Yeah,
for me,
I'm asking
personally.
out of genuine, like, I'm confused in myself about this question. So
yeah, because I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure what depression is for other people. And all that. It's a strange word.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of when people say, that for me the color blue is this, but maybe it's something different for you, or that kind of thing. Like those kind of thought experiments.
Yeah.
But I feel as if, to me, depression is not sadness exactly, because sadness is like I find something alleviating about sadness. It's as if sadness is something that happens and goes. It's like a wave, maybe.
Yes.
For some reason, it's like a wave of sadness. And depression, maybe depression is like there's an aspect of attachment to it. It's not a wave. You hold on to the crest of the wave and you stay there.
I agree. It seems I tend to use the word depressed, I guess, when I'm talking about a state where it feels like a kind of purgatory state. Do you know what I mean? It's liminal about it.
It's between.
I'm frozen. Yes. I'm trapped. It's a feeling of being trapped mainly. In between the realization that some terrible apocalypse has to happen, but not wanting it to happen, maybe something like that. And so it creates a paralysis. And it's not the same as when because I have many issues, so I also know a lot about panic and anxiety and stuff. And this is distinct, so for me, it's like being really sad versus being very panicked versus being very depressed are definitely different, but they all kind of partake of each other a little bit. They're not so different.
Yes.
So it makes it confusing often. And the same triggers that make me depressed will often also later or before I'm depressed cause more direct sorts of panic reactions where it's a real kind of like vertigo physical sensation,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've never had like I don't think I've ever had like a panic attack, but I recognize the feeling of panic as yeah, vertigo, like almost like my chest cavity,
Yeah.
like a feeling of whoa, like I'm going to something is going to snap, something is going to explode. Like I don't know. Uh which is
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, I wonder how much that how you could translate that into the language of chakras, for example.
Oh,
I
yes.
find that very
Interesting.
interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
and I think this somehow connects it back to sync in some way, and psychosis, because
Yes.
one
Yeah.
of the things that I've been fascinated listening to people talk about psychosis is that I find it very difficult not to see psychosis as essentially synchronicity. And there's a feeling of me, there's a part of me that thinks I'm wrong because I don't know, it
Yeah.
seems too simplistic to say that. I think it's a certain kind of, there is something else, there's an extra thing. But there are, when people are describing certain of the things that they experience, it often has to do with finding uh, correlations. Like
Yes.
when
No,
people
it's
are
the
talking,
same thing. You're right. There's definitely something there. Yeah.
because I was watching someone on YouTube talking about like how he started just finding correlations much more meaningful in a threatening way. So he would like see a car outside his apartment, and then he would see like some dust on the floor, and he would immediately assume that someone from that car had come into the house or something
Ah, aha.
to
Interesting.
chase him. So that there is a sync there. You're seeing the car, you're seeing
Yes.
the dust, and you're seeing like a meaningful connection between them. They're both
Yes.
happening at the same point in time.
Yes.
Um, and
Well, here's the funny
stuff like
thing,
that.
right?
Yeah.
What we would say is psychotic about that is the fact that it
Mm.
jumps to a literal interpretation. But
Yeah.
don't we do the same thing with an extra
Mm.
buffering step so that we can pretend we're not doing that? When we say that that it's symbolic, but that that the symbolism is happening in an objective reality space
Yes.
somehow,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Like.
what Jung says. Like, so it starts to make it seem like we're all just crazy people that are too smart to allow ourselves to naively believe that we're crazy. So we've constructed a little
Right.
intellectual like scrim to hold some distance between ourselves and the psychosis, which has had the effect maybe of holding some distance between ourselves and the psychosis. So
Mm.
maybe it is a cure in that way. But
Hmm.
I don't
Right.
know,
It's
just
like
random thought there. But
yeah. It's like instead of saying like exactly instead of saying some actual human being has entered into my house, we say a ghost has entered into my house,
yes,
or
yes, yes. A ghost. That human being didn't arrange the dust, but a
yeah,
ghost came in. Came in. A ghost appeared in between the human being and the car, and between the dust and the car,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the ghost arranged that dust, and that's
Mhm.
quite real. And yeah, there's a compulsion. There's a need to believe in the objective status of the sink.
Mm.
The sink itself compels that attitude.
Right.
And one way
Yeah.
or another, it's gonna win. You know,
Mm.
it's gonna. It seems to me that there's something very sinister. Like it, it's gonna win. It's just a matter of what trick is gonna work on you in the end.
Yes. And at least speaking from personal experience, I think that the ghost theory is what has allowed me to survive, I
Yeah,
think.
me too.
Because if I thought that it was all like actual people, I wouldn't leave my apartment. I wouldn't turn my computer on. Like I can see how somehow believing in its
God,
objective reality.
it's so
Yeah.
good. By the way, especially today, so for me,
Yeah.
it's like remember these things. Like, yes, there was a point in time where I really believed that, like John Carpenter and the government and like some
Mm.
Illuminati thing were all like talking to aliens and like
Mm-hmm.
like that was a bad place.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think being some years away from it now, I can look back and say that was a pretty bad place. I'm glad I only stayed there for some months, you know. It as soon as it became more about ghosts, there was a dramatic increase in just my like ambient mental well-being, you know.
Yeah.
I was no longer like paranoid in this really bad way, you know. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, it's okay. This is different. This is even maybe cool, you know. Like I get to be a ghost boy and talk to ghosts, and I can get
Yes.
along with that. The like the other thing wanted me to like go like 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 form like a superhero team with John Carpenter and like kill the Illuminati or something. Like it was not a good, like I never get, you know, I was never like gonna do that, of course. It was one of those things where I immediately was like, I'm just insane. This is all insane. But that was, oh man. Yeah, sync can be really bad. We still haven't figured out the proper tone for our outreach stuff with this, because you kind of want to warn people, but at the same time you want to entice them a little bit because maybe there's something that could help them. It's like you're trying to lead them to a very delicious grape, but it's through all these thorny bush elements, you know? And you kind of know there's no way to avoid it. Like if you want that grape, you're just going to have to tear your hand up. But at the same time, you're like, maybe I can help this person, give them some tips, you know, don't stick it in really fast, or, you know, I don't know what you would say about trying to avoid these thorns, but
yeah.
something. It's all stupid because they're not going to listen anyway. They're just going to tear their hand up.
It's funny.
But I do feel
wonder
somehow that I have to say, like, you know, because it's like there's too much. There's way too much in the other direction of synchronicity. It's the meaning of life, and it's, you know, whenever you see a sync, it's the universe telling you that you're so great and everything's love, and like,
yeah.
You know, like I believe all that, you know.
Yeah.
But I also know that synchronicities can happen that are mean-spirited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, at least on the level of like, on the level where that's operative. You know what I'm saying? I know that we can have this weird divine view where there's no such thing as mean-spiritedness. It's all a big divine joke, you know. So it's all in the spirit of laughter. It's all a big clown show here anyway, right? So human suffering in that view just becomes another amusing aspect of the rodeo, I suppose, you know. And I've had that view, so I know that's a real view. But but the other view I found doesn't go away, at least not for me. I'm still a human being that gets hurt and hurts other people, and, you know, is engaged in that wheel of suffering, you know. And so at that level, where did we start this round? Forgotten again. Shit.
Well, I was just thinking that maybe that's why
I feel like I'm conforming to a very terrible pothead stereotype right now, but it's really not. Like, it's not normally an issue for me.
Well,
really,
you know, there was
today.
there was something you said earlier that I thought was very interesting, that emotion doesn't let you finish thoughts.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I had a
very intense feeling there at the end of that one, and now I don't know where I'm at in the thought. Oh well.
So we were talking about the.
This is going to be a painful one to listen back to. I'm like, you idiot! You had such a great idea there. Just finish the thought. Oh well.
It's funny though, because I feel at the same time this is kind of like a study in emotion. Or something.
Yes. Yeah. We're making an art piece about emotion.
Because
well, this is interesting. We'll just pivot here. Sorry, everybody. If there was some point to what I was saying, I guess it's gone. Would you describe yourself as an emotional person against the average, you know?
Wow.
I'm just curious.
Difficult.
To sort of see where we stand on this wheel. Because I think I'm so emotional, it cripples me. Like, I cry almost every day. Like, It's just a regular thing for me. I like have, things really affect me, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I am not in that sense. Like I don't think I have the opposite situation where
Mm.
I sometimes wish I found it easier to cry, because I don't think
Oh,
I've
interesting. Yeah,
I
we're
don't
in
think I've
such opposite situations. I'm always like
Yeah.
trying to get it to stop. Like, fuck's sake, stop the crying.
It's like
Yeah.
I really feel like I don't know. I don't think I've cried since since I was like very young, and I want to in a way because
Mhm.
sometimes um I just feel very blocked off in the expression of my emotion. However,
Yeah.
if we in the
Hmm.
feelings, like that's the thing in terms of feelings, if like emotion as like what's happening under the surface, I would say yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that makes life difficult because I can't express it.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize like how it's funny, man. We really sound like teenagers, and I love it.
Don't
Like, people
we? Yeah. No, this is such a middle school idea. This whole conversation. Yeah, it's
people
true.
don't know how hard it. You know.
They don't know. It's so true. They don't know how hard it is. Oh, everybody has their middle school feelings, though, even in
Yeah,
adulthood,
yeah,
I think.
yeah.
Well, this was so actually, this connects now to 9/11
Yes.
and Christ and all this, because I had these big
Mm,
realizations recently about this,
mm,
about the
yeah.
visibility of suffering and how
Mm.
central that is to the Christian idea, but
Uh-huh.
how kind of explicit it's been somehow, because it's been carried mostly by the Christian imagery. It hasn't been carried so much by the dogma. There's
Oh,
plenty of
yeah.
conversation about suffering, but I mean to call attention specifically to the idea that to be human is to be seen as uh, someone who is struggling, actually, and that if you adopt that attitude, it's like a magic pill for empathy to some degree. You know,
Mm,
this isn't an enemy. It's not a competitor. It's not even a friend or a lover,
mm,
it's a human being who is writhing in the human condition. And so Christ just shows that. It just shows the spectacle of the suffering body. And so
mm.
that's been the focus. But what we've all missed is that it's a picture of that. It's not that it's that. It's that it's an
Uh-huh.
image of that we worshipped for 1,000 years. That's significant,
Mm.
I think.
So
uh,
so so that
so
you mean that Christ is an image of that the images
what we were
of the
worshiping wasn't, in a sense, what we're worshiping isn't Christ. We were
uh-huh.
worshiping pictures of Christ. It's the it's the fact that the suffering is turned into art to be observed and eaten. You know,
Mm.
and somehow that connects to the 9/11 idea so profoundly. I don't know how to
Yes.
express this. Um, the word is spectacle. It's the double meaning of spectacle, as glasses that provide clarity and as
Oh.
event that
Oh
holds
shit.
attention.
Mm.
It's those two things together, and it's already there in the Christ thing. It's just that we don't see the frame in the Christ image. There isn't anyone in the Christ image who's drawing a painting of Christ. That would make
Yeah.
it perfectly loopy and just what it ought to be. And that's
Oh,
what
I
the
see.
9/11 painting becomes, because it's Mr. N with his glasses viewing the explosion. Sorry, people have
Mm.
no idea what I'm talking about. You just have to go watch my YouTube videos, uh, which we'll link
No,
to
but
or something. But yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So now in that, it's as if the South Tower explosion is a recreation of the crucifixion, but now it has a witness. The witness is included in the image. So the idea of witnessing, you know, is is now called into the center. It's not so much the suffering itself. Now it's about
Yeah, man.
the
Yeah.
conscious apprehension of it. You know, we're really going to consciously understand this now. That we are united in a kind of non-dualistic enjoyment suffering libido thing that connects us to God quite literally. And I think that then that comes together in the 9/11 precog or something. Anyway, it's some kind of something though that's been occurring to me with a tremendous amount of affect. When I think about these ideas, I get really emotional because it's about the return of Christ as an image. And it just makes me want to cry. And so it has that similar kind of effect. It's an idea that hypnotizes me a little bit. I can't relate to it intellectually.
Yeah.
And when it shows up in my room, it just is like casting these vibes at me. And I'm like, oh, what is this? What is this Christ idea? Christ and 9/11, though, like those two things together, it seems like such a bizarre intersection until you think about it. And then it isn't so much because of the fact that 9/11 in a way, it was a spectacle on the hill that we all watched.
Yeah.
It's all the same sacrifice, blood sacrifice stuff, Why is that? So getting back to the synchronicity as it's like the goodness of the world or of all this. What about all this stuff though? That's all this blood magic though that seems to hover around it all the time. Somehow that it's like fear or anguish or sorrow or something that is motivating it just as much as we might think love is motivating it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
It's funny, man. That thing. No. That thing about the picture including the viewing of the picture into itself.
Yes. Yeah.
I think those are the moments when sync becomes the most numinous for me. When I'm watching or I'm watching a movie or I'm analyzing something, and the analysis gets to a point where I can see the analysis analyze itself or something like that. And this happens like in Arachnophobia, the Jeff Daniels movie. I think is that his name?
Yep.
And where
God, dude, fuck. that movie is such a hard watch. It's like sync-wise, like it's a numinous movie. I agree.
It's a really strange movie because I remember having like such a moment at the end because basically there's this whole sort of constant association between like spiders and screens. The spider's always like reflected on surfaces.
The spider just appeared in my Moonwalker analysis. It's going to be a big symbol in this movie. We just started talking about it last episode. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's associated with Mr. Big, the drug dealer that kidnaps children.
Oh, wow.
Played by Joe Pesci somehow. Anyway, sorry.
Fuck. No, I mean, yeah. Those moments are really strange because I remember like there's this
Joe Pesci, i.e. from Home Alone, that was also like kidnaps kids there, in the Chris Columbus production that also receives 9/11 precog. Like, it's just such a weird circle.
Yeah, fuck. Oh, he's going to be. He's going to be in this new movie, The Irishman. The new Scorsese movie.
I heard about that. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Spiders, I don't understand them, but they seem so like Spider-Man. Alan Green, so the 9/11 Spider-Verse, all this stuff.
Yes. Well, the thing with Arachnophobia that really got me is how there seemed to be a point in the film where, and that's the strange thing, where you can analyze a film after watching it, like in an academic sort of way, like let's sit down and analyze this movie, or you can also, once you get like into sync, the experience of watching a movie is an analysis of the movie. I mean, probably it always is. I don't know. But
right.
And then you get this strange thing where there are certain movies where when you're watching them as a sync head, the movie sometimes reaches like a crescendo, a climax that other people I don't think would experience as crescendo.
Right. Oh,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
and that's because of how you've been interpreting it. So if
Yes.
you've been, because if you're watching Arachnophobia, then all these images of spiders associated to mirrors and screens and paintings, they accumulate, and then the final scene where he's confronting this, he actually like sees himself reflected in the eyes of the spider or something like that.
Right.
There is a moment like that where I was watching the movie and it felt as if the movie was like looking at me.
That's it. Yeah.
and
I
and
really
it's as
like
if
this avenue, by the way. Kind of these
mm,
these subtler subjective aspects of sync. It's hard to talk about this stuff. The feeling that the movie is watching you. That's an important one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the like you said about the one tower is watching the other tower
Yes.
in the 9/11, that
And in that one, it's very it's somehow they're not really watching each other. One of them is
right.
clearly the witnesser, and one is clearly the performer. You know.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
It's funny. I remember that there's in one of my Donkey Kong videos, I was analyzing just like a promotional image of one of some of the characters from the game, and they're all like arranged in a circle.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Right.
and they're all bears. And I had
Yeah.
it's funny because I think I analyzed, and this was years ago, but it all conformed to the same thing, where one half of the circle of these characters was watching the other half, and it created this strange like it's like an asymmetrical yin yang or something, where one half is watching the other half. And the funny thing is that this only becomes visible if you're interpreting the image, which then is really strange because it means that the interpretation of the image
Yes.
is what brings about the image seeing itself. Like the image,
Yes.
it's the image
Right.
becomes
Right.
the image becomes aware of itself as you become aware of it, or the image becomes aware, like
Right.
the
Interesting.
I don't know,
Huh.
the,
Yeah.
the there is yeah, these things are difficult to
They're very difficult. Yeah. I'm thinking now, I'm just going to run with the intuition. I'm thinking of what I always call the 9/11 feast. That's seen in Back to the Future Part 1, where Marty is at the Bateses having
yes.
dinner. And so, he's there with his mother as a teenager and that whole scenario and all that. And they're watching the honeymooners. That scene is one of those scenes where I feel something very subtle that's hard to describe, that it's related, I think, to what you're describing, but maybe slightly different. And so in order to attempt to describe it, I'm just going to sort of describe this scene in a weird way and see how this goes. It's a scene, it's a religious painting that looks like the Last Supper in terms of its basic composition. Okay, it's like a bunch of figures around a table, kind of looking at the camera almost. Not quite, but then in the extreme foreground of this image is a television set. So they're looking at a camera, which is the movie that you're watching. But in the fiction space of the movie, they're looking at the opposite of a camera, which is a TV. So it's like right there at the edge of the frame is a funny duality. It's the fourth wall is highlighted in that image. They place a TV there, which is an inversion of what the actual apparatus is that sits on the other side of the fourth wall. It's like that TV represents the camera almost.
Yeah.
But it's in this frame already. And
it's
remember,
in the frame,
it's a movie where we see, like, so much of that movie is about Marty filming the time machine. And the terrorists and that whole situation. So we've seen video cameras, and we see video cameras playing things back on TV sets that were recorded in the future. And then in this scene, Marty's watching an episode
Oh
that
shit!
he's already seen, and so he describes it as a rerun. But that's temporally stupid given his situation, because it's not a rerun. He's in 1955, and it's the first airing of that episode.
Yeah.
But then, okay, what they're watching is what I describe as an image match for 9/11. It's like, it's this episode of The Honeymooners where, is it Ralph and I don't remember the character names, but it's like the married couple on that show. The actress is a redhead, and so she's sort of sitting there with like bright red hair, and then like just opposite her is like this male character dressed up like the Tin Man, basically. He's just in metal from head to toe, and he's got like cookware on his head, and like this giant visor, and he's holding this like loudspeaker. He just becomes a perfect North Tower, complete with projection space symbolic aspects, standing there next to this redhead. And that's sort of it's sitting like it's just this image that they quote, that Zemeckis quotes for some reason. But it becomes the image that the people are looking at, in an image that is about you looking at the image, that kind of also seems to imply that people are looking beyond the fourth wall at you. And then, so that image then happens to be this Mr. N, Mrs. S, fire and steel idea. Just two figures, each with these aspects. And then if you look at that shot, which is a reverse shot, right? There's the main shot of the people eating, that's like the Last Supper. Then it cuts to show the TV. And in that shot, we see some background of the living room. And those properties, the like the cool metal and the red fire, are replicated in the background. Like they kind of spill out from the TV structurally,
into the living room,
into the living room. And then it cuts back to the supper, and you see that scene is also globally as a scene is arranged in the same way. And then you see that in that scene, on the opposite wall behind the figures, so directly parallel with the TV, which remember is right up close to the frame of the movie, to the camera, on the opposite wall behind them is a painting on the wall of like two red barns, It's like just these perfect two red barns that are also directionally skewed in a way that makes me crazy. The whole image is like a mirror refraction game. It's like that TV and the painting on the wall are bouncing light back and forth or something, which is also where the fourth wall is, where this weird infinite loop happens as you view it. But then the thing that happens on each kind of loop through the loop is a structural replication of the 9/11 picture. And then it's people eating a feast as they observe it, talking about media temporal asynchronies or something, like the whole rerun scenario. In that scene, I have the feeling. So anyway, this is all just, I don't know how to describe the subtlety. So that was just me describing what's in the picture, as far as I can tell, In terms of what it makes me feel, though, it's like, it's the feeling that a secret play was taking place. And it's a very weird double reflection kind of aspect, because of course a play is taking place. It's a movie. These are all actors. It is all arranged. It is all theater. But it's like you become aware that there was a secret production happening on a higher level, and that these were all actors in this other production, and none of them knew it. And it's a big surprise for everybody at the end. And so in that scene, it's as if the entire self-reflective, infinitely refracting, weird mirror hall aspect of it somehow literally, I describe this, but it's just what you said, like the film comes alive, but more like it feels in that moment like the only thing I can say about it is it feels as if a literal window into eternity has opened.
Yeah.
Literally. I don't mean that in any kind of metaphorical way. I have the feeling I could fall into that screen and die. I get weirded out by it, you know?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
physical, partly. Physical vertigo feeling are on some of these images. So it's strange.
God, I have a lot to say about that because
Yeah.
I love the fact that because this is something I've noticed in my own analysis of other things as well, that the screen in this Back to the Future thing is placed in the middle because there are elements
Right.
there are elements behind the TV and there are elements in front of the TV.
Yes.
So I noticed that again in the Donkey Kong games or whatever. There is this thing I noticed where whatever I associate to the screen or the entry point through which the viewer and the movie are interacting is in the middle, whatever that means.
Oh, that's
Because
interesting. How interesting. Yeah.
sometimes it can feel as if you are just looking into a screen and therefore your back is against the wall kind of thing, that everything that's happening is happening in front of you on the
Yes.
screen. But it's as if these movies and video
Yeah, that's
games,
interesting.
they keep emphasizing this idea that the movie and even the projection from which the movie is emanating is in the center, like in a mandala or something.
Yes. How interesting.
And it
My
also
early
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, just a quick thought that came to my head is how the Redhead and the Tin Man, that's such an interesting pair because first of all, it makes me think whether the Tin Man how does it resonate with the idea of the Beast, the Redhead and the Beast,
Oh, interesting.
like the
Yeah.
Scarlet Woman and the Beast? How would the Beast be a
Yes.
mechanical, technological thing?
Yes.
And also
That's
just this
interesting.
other idea that whenever I think of the red-headed woman or the Scarlet Woman, I always think of, for some reason, fire. And
Yes, same. Although I also want to note just at the outset that
yes,
a red-headed woman is just one symbol that can stand for the South Tower.
Oh, yes.
And there are many in Back to the Future. It's not all red-headed women in that movie.
Yeah.
But in that
No,
scene, it is. Yeah.
And no, I suppose, yeah, exactly. I think more in the context of like the Book of Revelations and that kind of thing, like
Yes.
the Scarlet. Like I always think of the red woman as fire, and that always makes me think of light in the sense of like the projection, the beam of light, or
Yeah.
vision itself, so that maybe the act of seeing and perceiving requires fire, light, as if the red hair, the red woman, and again, I don't know why it's a red head woman, but like that, I associate it with vision as well, so that you're seeing something about seeing.
Yes, that's very interesting.
Anyway, a lot of stuff.
No, for sure. I mean, fire and vision are
Mm-hmm.
deeply associated, at least in like the Western philosophical, like it goes to Plato's allegory of the cave and all that.
Oh yes, yeah.
And just, I would think just it speaks to something probably common to all cultures that has to do with shadow puppetry on the cave walls and things in our deep past. Yeah.
Right. Oh, good point. Yeah, interesting.
Shadow plays.
Right, shadow play.
That's it. There's a shadow play taking place in all forms of play. It's so hard to make sense of this, Alan. In a certain way, I am really quite sick of it. I've looked at so many pictures and marked them all up and shown over and over again how this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, it kind of becomes like, okay, here's another one. I'm not even always that impressed anymore. I'm just like, I always appreciate the beauty of them. They're always beautiful, unique individuals. I'm like, oh wow, look at this match. Like how it does it such an interesting way. So I always appreciate them in that way, but the kind of the shock of like, oh God, it's an image that matches 9/11 in 100 ways at once, that's gone. I don't know what it is still, of course. Like it is possible, it's more than possible, I suppose, that like I've found an area of like noise that I can tune to that makes it possible to see this wherever I want. And then I just pick places that I want unconsciously, maybe, and decide to unconsciously see it there. So then I say, aha, Mac and Me. It's all about 9/11. But maybe I could have said it about some other movie. That's still an open question because of the way synchronicity makes use of this like multiple parallel context thing. That really makes it fucking difficult to think about it with any kind of intellectual precision, because there's something about it that resists that, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think we're back around to where we started with the question of what is all this anyway? What are we doing? Is this healthy or not? Is it helpful or not?
Yeah.
Are we on the trail of something or not? I mean, part of the problem, it seems to me, is that we have beliefs that have formed on the basis of these experiences we were just describing. There's just something subtle that can happen between you and the screen. And I think it's just a new instance, probably, of the same kind of subtle thing that can happen between you and a stream in nature. You can listen to a stream of water and hear God in that.
Yeah.
So, okay, you can look at a visual stream of information and maybe see God in that.
Yeah.
Or see something other that's emerging from beyond your ego in some way.
Yeah.
And so these things have happened to us, whatever they are, something purely in our heads or not, but whatever it is, it happened. And so now, in order to get on with life after something like that happens, I think you just need to tell yourself some kind of story. So in a way, it does all refocus on stories. Interstate 60 is such a profound film. It ends with just this realization, doesn't it? It's about the story. It's the stories itself. It's not about the delivery of the package of this or that. Who cares? That's also dumb. It's the recording of the experience, just having the experience. But the problem with having experience is that it's overexposed or something. There's too much in it. You can't have the experience unless you dilute the experience. And so you dilute it with a story that filters it into a particular ordered sequence. And so I don't know what your primary metaphor is. I don't know what my primary metaphor is. Is it Jesus or ghosts or some, collective mind self-organizing thing? Like I all of those things. I don't know. I flip all the time on this, but I need to have some kind of an explanation, or like the explanation can be that there is no it can be inclusive of that, of like, we don't know what it is. These are all metaphors and so on. But I just find it's the same thing. Like there's just a need. There's an animal need. The fundamental thing is probably something happened to us, and to anyone who calls himself a sync head, things have happened to us that really rattled us.
Yeah.
I was just very rattled, rattled like to the point of like rattled so much I lost my marbles or something. Mixed metaphors, And so then you're in the you have. I think we're so similar to abductees. I don't know. I really think this is an unexplored similarity. It's just we're a loose network of experiencers who don't know what it is that happened to them, who have a variety of different ideas about it. But fundamentally, we're all kind of on some level, it seems to me, and I don't want to, speak for other people. Maybe I'll just speak for myself. I'll say for myself, I definitely feel like an individual who in some ways is trying to pick up the pieces of a shattered mind,
Yeah.
And is that individuation? Is that growth? Is it rather a disaster happened and I'm struggling to find an identity that can work now that I know that the world can include things like falling into a screen that way. It becomes a different world. You have to figure out how to live in it. I don't know. And that's just so much to the point recently, isn't it? Because we've just been, like, I would say, kind of assaulted by like negative sync or something. Just sync with this aspect of profound kind of agony to it or something.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, that's that's where I wanted to go with this, actually, because you were talking about diluting the experience, or the experience, like something about diluting it. I found very interesting because I think that one thing that I'm trying to do is reclaim some of the things that are considered psychosis, because when you consider them as, like, under the ghost metaphor, like we were saying,
oh God, okay, yeah, I have a supporting thing I'll say in a second,
right? Because suddenly the experience becomes more bearable, like you can actually navigate it better.
Yes.
And what happens then, I think, is that, at least I find, that I have a lot of the same experiences that people describe in psychosis. It's just that I somehow am I don't know what the word would be, but lucky enough to be able to navigate. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And what that means is that, for example, this guy on YouTube was talking about how he would, two different things. One was feeling of threat, feeling that people were going to, like, shoot him on the street or stuff like that. Like, and I've had this feeling a lot recently, actually, and even from a ghost perspective, like the feeling that different kinds of threats were threatening me, but they were all organized by the same ghost magnet.
Oh yeah.
So, like, you're almost run over by a car, almost accosted by a person, almost whatever, and it all feels like it's all the same energy.
Oh, these conversations make me feel so normal. Thank you. Ghost magnets. Yes. Ghost magnets. Fuck, such a thing. Yeah.
I'm glad, because the thing with that then is that, and that's where, of course, the occult and all that comes in, because the thing is, what the psychosis is describing, I think, can be described in terms of like just bad energy shit, like, like,
totally.
So that it can be real. That's what's fucked up. That the paranoia of the paranoid person can it can pick up something real. It's just that, how do you interpret it? How do you react to it? I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it turns out that I guess maybe, I mean, I've thought a lot about perspective and phenomenology and this stuff, and thought about that stuff before I was sync activated or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that
sync activated.
Yeah.
It's like the Power Rangers.
Yeah, I was thinking like Captain Planet, like 4 rings or whatever. That's such an alchemical one. Shit, I have no idea what I was saying.
Oh shit, I'm so sorry, man.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Captain Planet's worth it. He's a hero, gonna take pollution down to zero. Like the best thing.
Yeah, I loved Captain Planet. Fuck, but
help me. What were you talking about?
Yes, you
really
were saying that
lost it.
Before you were sync. So, that you've been studying phenomenology and.
Right. But why was I saying that? Shit.
before you were sync activated, you were already thinking about
What was it you had said that I was responding to? That'll help
yes,
me.
yeah. The thing about that sometimes the paranoia can be picking up something real. It's like an antenna.
Right.
It's like picking up something real. It's just how you interpret it or how you react to it or something like that.
Right.
Thing
So I was just gonna make the basic psychedelic point, of like, what is reality? Like,
yes.
once you really consider all this, like, the psyche is this weird jug that fills itself with its environment and tries to represent it in some way, and then part of that must be filling itself with itself so that it can represent itself to itself.
Right.
I mean, what is this whole situation? Like, it's all some mad dream, the whole thing, all of it, experience, instincts, ideas, thoughts, other people, the world. Like, I'm never convinced I have any idea what any of this actually is. That seems like a complete mirage idea to me, because what it actually is could only be apprehended if you perceived it. That's what you mean when you say, "Oh, let's figure out what it actually is," right? That means
right.
that means hold in your awareness what it actually is. But that's impossible by definition, because a perspective, it exists by excluding complexity.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So you can't. Right. So you can never actually. Yeah. That's interesting. And yeah. That's definitely
so at that
intuition.
level. I think there's just kind of, there's just a situation, like, human beings are very weird. We don't know what we are, what we're doing, and we think, it's often strikes me when I think along these lines that, like, we're kind of in the dark ages of mental health still. Like, think back to the kinds of ideas people had about the physical body before we knew anything about the body, and when things would go wrong with it, or like people thought during the Black Death that if you would drink molten gold, that would cure you of the plague.
Wow. Yeah.
People reaching for like weird symbolic ideas because they're just projecting something into the big scary question mark. That's the situation with mental health today. I think the whole of modern psychiatry is one big weird symbolic projection onto something that is quite different. So we're just constantly kind of we're just frightened. It's clear that organ, the psyche, can break down in ways that cause a lot of suffering. And so we're all interested in trying to improve that situation. But unfortunately, I think we've gotten on the wrong path with it. I mean, to me, people like Bateson and Jung and others were pointing towards an understanding of the psyche that would have integrated into it, traditional shamanic approaches to dealing with it, under the assumption that those ancient practices developed for good reason. Like, people had superstitions that made them wash their hands before we knew about germs, because there's a symbolic thing there, the cleansing water and the baptism and all of this, obviously people didn't wash their hands enough. They were getting sick all the time because they didn't understand the actual mechanism. But there might be.
Wow, I hadn't thought
Maybe
of that.
that's even a bad example or something. I don't know that much about the actual history about hand washing and germs, but it's just clear that kind of thing could exist. There can be folk and does exist. There's folk knowledge that's actually very wise, even if it's just wise somehow in its effect. Like, we just stumbled onto a method that worked, so we kept going, and gradually over time, lots of people made many little contributions, and then you end up with something like a shamanic tradition that, maybe it has a whole bunch of extra weird stuff in it, and a whole bunch of stuff is missing from it, and none of it actually really makes sense. But it's the kind of thing where it's like, it's just like a device, like a way of getting in, like just think of the melody this way. Now you can sing it a little easier, break it up in your head in this different way, and now it'll be a little easier for you. Why? The melody isn't that way. Like, why should I do that? Like, don't ask questions, just do it. Trust me, it works. There's still, we're so worried we're going to get kind of taken for a ride, or like that it's going to end up being like like a brain dead idea that we naively believed and now we've been made fools of or something.
Yes.
Instead of trying to see like, well, maybe there's really something here. So I don't know. Those guys just seemed like they were on a different trip with it. It makes me sad that like cognitive behavioral therapy is the main like idea these days about mental health. Like
Yeah.
it's a good model. It works, you know. We say the same thing about it. That's you know, to me though, it's just another folk model ultimately. I don't buy any of the sort of the clinical superiority behind these things. It just seems like here are some other models, ones that strike me as particularly shallow. Like they need some augmentation from something that can deal with people who go through like a religious level crisis. I don't think cognitive behavioral therapy has shit to say to people like that, you know?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think we're moving into a period maybe in history where we're going to see a lot more people having religious level crises in their personal stories, you know?
Yeah. 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 I feel that too.
Because I think it just tracks a general kind of movement into a period of struggle again, world historically, you know?
Yeah.
When things get bad in the exterior situation, the fantasy world has to carry the torch for humanity a little more, you know?
Yeah.
Which does make it all it is apocalyptic and a bit frightening to witness the West sinking deeper and deeper into its fantasy images without any increasing awareness of what it's doing. It does rather have the feeling of something marching into the jaws of a big devouring monster. I don't know, man. I think globally my perspective today is just that life is very difficult, and what what constitutes a good or a bad path through it is very complicated. And I think it's important when, you know, so maybe I'll just open this up a little bit and say, hey, you know, if there are people out there who are struggling with anything, but in particular with like synchronicity in some way, I just want to say it's probably normal and we're probably all doing a pretty good job, you know? Like like once we're in the domain of, okay, we're people that have these weird perceptions and so on, I don't know, at least speaking for you and me, we're here, right? We're managing our lives more or less. We're showing up every day and doing all that. I do have the feeling though, and this relates a little, sorry, this is slightly opening up another can of worms, but it does seem as if there's a, okay, now this is very tricky. You'll have to weigh in, but I think there's a cultural thing happening, like a more like a bigger wave happening of a feeling of something is something is unsustainable about the way we are living, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think that's just maybe that is true for us personally as well. Maybe there are still changes in our personal lives that we're avoiding or something that have to happen. But I don't know. I think that we were talking about this before we started the official call. But the Kanye West like Jesus is King moment is some kind of an anticipatory moment for our culture. You know, to me, it's not clear like if it's good or bad yet. Like an imminent overflowing of religious feeling could be very bad as well. It could be the Inquisition or something, you know?
Yeah.
Or some new horror that, you know, we can't quite anticipate, but it isn't some kind of motivated by a similar energy, you know? Or maybe it's really just going to be some kind of much nicer thing. I don't know. What do you think about all that? Maybe we can just globally start with the issue of sorting out whether an apocalyptic intuition is about yourself or something genuinely apocalyptic. I don't know how to, seems like such an issue with sync that nobody talks about that much because we all feel quite silly. I feel very ridiculous personally. Like I don't like to admit that I have like really heavy apocalyptic feelings sometimes, where I'm certain the world is ending tomorrow, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do get into those states. I've learned to, like most of these states, to just like let them be states and remind myself that tomorrow I might be in a different state, you know? Um, but they come, and they're coming with increasing frequency or something. So I'm a little alarmed by it, you know?
Yeah.
I just think that, but increasingly when they're happening, it feels more and more to me like explicitly as if I'm grounding an energy from the collective or something. I don't know if that's just me like dissociating more or something or what, but it just feels some days like there's an anticipation of something. There's some huge anticipation mounting of what nobody knows. So we're just representing it in different weird ways in our movies. What is Us about? What is Bird Box about? What is Maniac about?
Yeah.
For all these weird movies about, you know, something is coming. It seems to me. Arrival. In a movie called Arrival is a big deal. That movie. It's Arrival, and it's about non-linear time arriving. I think there's really something arriving. So I don't know what it is either, but I think that those of us in let's say now in the shamanic community, open it up even a little wider. I think a lot of people are feeling like, wow, there's something imminent, you know, and have been feeling that way for a while, you know. I think it goes back to millennial stuff. Like that's when I first noticed a global apocalyptic energy mounting in the world. It was leading up to the year 2000, and it kind of 9/11 happened, and then kind of, it's so funny. 9/11 happened and distracted us from that stuff, but it was in a way the flowering of that stuff. We just didn't know it. It's taken a long time to figure out how significant 9/11 was. We have a natural tendency to minimize its significance now because we want to move on from it, and also because human beings tend to think that they can't be living in the shadow of something so significant. They think, why me? That I should be alive while this happened. It can't be that kind of thing. People are making too big of a deal. But I think it's a big deal. It's in history books forever, that's for sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. It's hard to say because, like you say, well, it's strange. I feel recently like I care less and less about other people. This is hard to explain because it sounds really weird when you play it. It's almost as if
I think I get what you mean.
Like,
or is it that you find yourself caring less about other people, or maybe that you find yourself just caring more about yourself, and it is a bit of a zero-sum game. So
maybe it is that, yeah. It's funny. It reminds me a lot. The image that comes to mind was the first time I took mushrooms, which was an okay time. It went well. It wasn't like, and I remember this feeling coming over me at the onset of complete non-interference with other people, like that. I remember because another friend was actually having a really bad time, and he started freaking out. He started thinking he was going to die.
Oh no! Yeah.
And I was sort of, I was sort of, well, luckily there were other people around, so I wasn't alone with him. But I started feeling that the best thing I could do was to not get excited about it or worried about it or something like that. Like I remember, and it's not something intellectual. It's not something I could avoid. It's like I physically got into this mode where I was just observing stuff. I was just observing this guy getting panicky, and I was completely like okay with it.
Yeah.
I couldn't avoid being okay with it, and it's in a less intense way. I feel recently like you say, that I can notice people in my life, family or friends, that I get the feeling that they are on the edge of having some sort of a Dark Night of the Soul sync moment. That's my interpretation of what's happening to them.
Right.
And in the past, I would have like wanted to help as much as I could. And recently it's like maybe like you say, it's just I just don't have the energy to help them. But also I'm feeling as if my attempts to help them haven't actually made things better.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like there's a difficult balancing act here between allowing someone to go through the process and helping. And
Yes.
I feel as if even at a global level, it's this weird duality between the apocalyptic feel of things are getting worse and worse, and
Mm.
then at the same time, simultaneous with that, there is this personal feeling in me that things are like, because the worse things get and the sinkier they get, to put it in traditional terms, the more convinced I am of the of reality being something magical and mystical, not in a
Mm-hmm.
not in a sort of happy go lucky way, but in just in the sense that that it the more precarious the world seems and everything's collapsing, the safer I feel in some weird way, because
Mm.
the more aware I become of the foundation,
Mm.
of the fact that it's all um, uh, I don't even like calling it divine or whatever, but those are the words
Mm.
that we culturally understand. So there is a strange thing, because then it's like, um, well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
how to navigate that. To be honest, it's
No. It's
yeah.
one thing I wanted to interject was that
Hmm.
I think we often, and I do too, like think about apocalypse in terms of worsening conditions, but
Hmm.
I guess I sometimes try to mean it more like I'm not sure how to say exactly. It's like an anticipation of something terrible, but that's not the
Ah,
same as something bad. It's frightening. There's like
yes.
a something profound and world altering is about to occur. It could be
Yeah.
good or bad. But it's just this like looming something. It's
Yeah.
part of the anxiety of it. You don't know what it is yet. You're not even certain. Because the apocalypse is the return of Christ, supposedly. But then also we imagine that it's this disaster. It's the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like both of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is always happening to us. It is descriptive of something we go through every day. You
Mhm.
have expectations. You anticipate things happening. You anticipate them as fantasy, and then they happen in their reality, and they're always a little different. And sometimes they're horrible, and sometimes they're great. But it just keeps coming, and there just keeps being this wave, this roller coaster wave of anticipating the next thing. And
Mm,
so
mm,
I think Apocalypse is somehow like about the anticipation, maybe the
mm.
state of anticipation in which we dream about the future, which then somehow has the effect of pulling the future into existence, maybe in a way that's slightly more determinate than we might think. In the sense of like dream, the fantasies that we have during the period of anticipation influencing directly the form of the apocalypse that we receive at the end of the anticipatory period. So maybe it
Ah,
is like a Ghostbusters idea, choose the form of the destructor,
ah,
because that's what it seems to me
oh,
about 9/11, that it was summoned on the
yeah.
basis of our renderings of Christ so repetitively, maybe.
Interesting. Oh, wow.
I don't know. That's just getting weird, like magic causal again. It's like
Mm,
we drew Christ a million times and God answered with a painting of Christ made synchronistically out of a
mm,
disaster in the American Empire in
mm.
2001. The middle
Well,
of Rome again, basically. Having to say like the correct location too.
but I do keep thinking of stuff like global warming in this sense as well,
Ah,
of
yes.
of that that we it's so funny, isn't it? Maybe this is too naive. I don't know. The
Mm,
idea that because we call planet Earth Mother Earth,
yes.
the fact that global warming or the like environmental catastrophe seems to be connected to issues of uh, the masculinity and femininity.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's being all connected in some way.
Oh, that's a
Um,
very astute point, I think. How like I
I
think
don't
I've
know.
kind of seen that maybe, but never
Mm,
quite so explicitly. That like the gender war, such as that's a thing that's going on,
yes.
and global warming as an organizing myth are
Mm.
dovetailing in a very interesting way, aren't they? Huh.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
the 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 killing of Mother Earth.
Yes.
Um, it's very, yeah,
Yeah.
and that is so strange because then it
Oh,
means
Mac and me ideas. Earth spirit, Earth child,
oh yeah, Earth
young
spirit.
Earth child goddess in the middle of the Earth. It's blue and sings a song in there and that
Ah,
stuff.
wow. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, that's connecting to stuff. But it really it feel and that's what's strange about that then is that these big historical events, and that's the the weird thing about Sync, I suppose, is that the fact that they are so symbolic doesn't make them any less um, materially real.
Right.
And
Right.
that's really strange because it's like more and more the world is starting to become a dream. Like things
Mm.
seem to like, or at least in my perspective of it, it's as
our
if
our worlds are becoming more and more like a dream, at least.
right,
Yeah.
right, and yet that doesn't mean that it's ethereal and that you can just uh,
No.
make it vanish away. In fact, it makes it's the opposite. It's almost
Can I tell my bird story? It seems so appropriate here.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It just is the perfect story. I wasn't going to tell any of my like sad like sync stories, but yesterday I went to see this girl that I had developed a crush on, and it ended up being like an unrequited love scenario. But prior to that going on, like I went to a bodega to get a sandwich, and in the bodega I had like a Red Twins twin fox symbol encounter. That was just a minor. It was kind of a minor encounter, but notable. And then I stepped out of this store, and these like birds, like a pair of birds that were chasing each other in some obvious like courtship maneuver, like like crashed into me. They crashed right into my face, and they were so close to my face that uh I really like I could smell these birds, They were like their wings clipped my face. They made contact with me. And for a few seconds, my entire visual field was just nothing but birds. And it was, it came at the conclusion of like a week of seeing more and more birds, like generally in a syncy way. And I had kind of gone into that day. I kind of like, Jordan, you're being, it's so funny. I actually thought this to myself that morning. I
Mm.
was like, Jordan, you're being silly about these birds. Like, it's
Uh-huh.
not a real thing. And then like, they violently slammed into my face. Could
Mm.
have given me a disease or something.
Right,
Sync
right.
doesn't give any fucks anymore. It's just like it's like just gonna
Yeah,
throw up these huge like oh gosh. Sorry.
yeah.
Does that or does that not enhance what you were talking about? I
Oh
hope it does.
no, yeah, yeah, no, exactly that especially the like the the materiality of it. It feels as if the dreams are
You know, like it, like that
yeah.
happened. Like it fucked up those birds' days too,
Mm.
probably. You know,
Mm.
that was a real event that in no way can be. It's just I'm just describing the same double thing over and over again. You know, but it's such a paradox: the symbolic and the literal coexisting.
Mm. Yeah.
And then about the timing of these things mainly. You know,
Mm.
if some birds. So first of all, it's strange because I've never run into birds like that really. Um,
Yeah.
so it's just it's the only time in my life that's happened, and it happened at a very poignant moment, you know. Um, so that's notable, of course. But even if it was something that happened from time to time, uh, it's positioned in a sequence here of other bird encounters and so on.
Mm.
And so therein lies the whole problem. There's the whole problem of this thing. What about it's that zone right there? It's the higher order pattern structure that for me, that's the part that my left brain can't get past.
Mm.
It always tries, but in the end, it always has to give it up and say, yeah, no, that's very, very unusual. Like the global organizing, like the global organizing magnet that puts all the little pieces together. I can't not believe in it. It's not an optional belief. Well, it's optional in the way that I could not believe in the existence of air or something. It's
Yeah.
just permeating my life so much now. Yeah, it's a little weird and invisible, like air, but reality doesn't make sense to me without air, and it doesn't make sense to me without admitting the objective organization of literal events according to a symbolic scheme in time with precision. So what the fuck is that? I mean, there's just no like sane way to grapple with that. Seems to me it's not a sane idea. That cuts out the whole reality game at its legs, kind of, because it's
Yeah.
pointing to this thing and saying the literal and the symbolic are so tightly synchronized that it has the effect of meaning that neither the symbolic nor the literal are what you thought they were. They're so fused that the whole separation starts to seem completely bogus and like
Yeah.
there's something completely else going on that is so different from an idea that's like a literal reality that animals exist in, and then in the heads of those animals they have little VR models of the thing that are different than the reality, you know. That may be, but that model can't account for this strange these strange synchronicities. That seems to imply that in some fundamental way that whole perspective is a weird error, and that it's something much more abstract maybe that we're in, like a game or a story, but not in the way that would imply like maybe a literal simulation or something, in a much weirder, deeper way than that. The whole thing is one big story. I don't know, you know, that kind of idea. Such a stupid thing to say, and the kind of thing that to someone who hasn't experienced their life becoming this kind of psychotically perfect story at some point, like maybe couldn't identify with. I don't know, but
Mm.
it just seems like something about synchronicity really I can't. The thing that's common probably in all the metaphors that make us feel okay about it are the metaphors that ascribe real intelligence to it and that just say it's an objective source of authorship that's not me. I think that
Yeah.
for some reason we want to say that about it, and
Mm.
I find that I get sort of ill when I reject that idea and
Mm.
feel better about most things when I accept that idea. So there's a kind of a real politic to this maybe of
Uh,
just needing to accept to say that and kind of suspending in a way the question of in an ultimate sense what is it? Is it me talking to myself? Is it the universe? Is it, you know, that's hard to answer, impossible
mm.
to answer. But you can know that there is something organized that you aren't making up in a traditional way you could understand. And then that's the kernel of the depth psychological idea, I guess. Then you know that you're in conversation always with these other parts. And I guess that's just the situation. So I guess we're not crazy. We're just realists. But it is rather, I feel, I don't know if you feel this way. I feel sometimes like Marty drifting through the waves of time, like I'm displaced a little bit by all this now. I don't know where my home is in time. I feel connected to ideas that seem to be coming from the future about this new spirituality and images and all this stuff, nobody really understands right now. It's very lonely, then at the same time, I feel so mired still in my past and pulled down by these weird traumas in my childhood and so on. As usual, it's the present that then recedes when you're so oriented towards futurity and the past, and those are the ghost domains, I would suppose, the past and the future.
Yeah.
Isn't sync in some way? It is the dead flowing into the present where they kind of oughtn't to be. They've stormed in through the through the rooftops or something, and they've invaded the party.
Yes. Yeah.
Supposed to stay in the future and the past, God damn it! But here they are, kind of bleeding through your everyday experience. It has the effect of kind of clouding or covering the actual present experience with weird ghost slime all the time.
Yeah.
Which is great when you're like us, I guess, and you love the ghost slime. But I also get frustrated. I don't know. I think, as usual, the solution to our problems, specifically you and me, Alan, has a lot to do with getting out of our heads and connecting with our bodies more in some way.